Welcome to episode 168 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about people in Canadian theatre featuring conversations with actors, directors, playwrights, and more. So I've been working on this writing project of mine. Well, it's a theatre project, but I'm in the process of writing it right now, so we'll call it a writing project. And I've been working on this project for about 3.5 years now, on and off. And it's kind of been breaking my butt. There have been periods of time when I concentrated on writing this and actually wrote nothing else. But I've been sort of stuck in a holding pattern on this project right now. It's sort of a Christmas story. I may have mentioned it once or twice before. It's something I'm going to be actually performing next December because I booked a theater for it. So it's something that I've been working on. And there's been this long period of time where I was really stuck on it. Stuck on an ending, stuck on where to take it. And I've recently sort of started to come to terms with that and found a direction for it. There's still sections of it that I don't want to say blocked because that makes it sound like it's something other than myself that's preventing me from finishing it. There's something in me that's preventing me from getting through to a certain point and finding a resolution to a storyline. And it's a really significant and probably the most important storyline in the whole thing that I'm still trying to find an answer to. And so it came to me just over the last few days as I was sick at home and sort of confined to my apartment that the trick to getting through a writing problem is boredom. We're really bad at boredom these days. It's a really hard thing for us to do is be bored. There's so many things. There's video games, there's our phones, there's this, that, and the other thing. And boredom is actually where our brain starts to do its own thing and actually be a creative monster, because that's when we need our brain to take us away. And so that's when it starts doing its imagination thing. And so once I had exhausted my interest in video games and Netflix and doodling on my phone, I put them all down and I sort of just realized that I was bored, and I finally let it happen. And so many things started to come to me that were solutions to the block, the problem. And so one thing I would say to you, if you're listening to this and you're a writer and you're stuck on a problem, whether you're a theater writer, whatever, if you're stuck, put down your phone, even turn off the music, and just let yourself be bored for a while. And it's really hard to do because let me tell you, my fingers were itching to pick up the phone. But when I didn't, and I did a few times, and let's not say that I'm perfect. There were a bunch of times when I couldn't resist the lure of my phone, and I picked it up and I did, Facebook, Twitter, the Instagram, the whole 9 yards. But when I didn't, that's when my brain was freed to start creating again. Have you had a breakthrough like that? If you have, I would really love to hear about it. And remember, you can always find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at StageworthyPod. And you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. And if you want to drop me a line to tell me about your writing project, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby. And my website is philrickaby.com. My guests this week on Stageworthy are the company of Leroy Street Theatre's production of Rajiv Joseph's Gruesome Playground Injuries. Gruesome Playground Injuries is on now at the Assembly Theatre in Toronto until February 9th. So, and you said you guys have been rehearsing here for about 2 months?
Yeah, we said yesterday, I think, was our 2-month anniversary since the first reading.
Today is.
Or today.
Today,
okay.
Today is exactly our 2 months.
Yeah. Wow, okay.
And then we've been here in my basement for the last 2 months, and starting on next Monday, we'll be actually moving into the theater space.
And that's the Assembly Theatre?
Yeah.
And how long do you have in the theater?
Well, we opened January 18th, so basically next week.
Because a week is still a good length of time in a theater. I've done a lot of shows where the day before you're moving in and rushing through, so that's pretty good.
We have a week of rehearsal and then we'll have a week of tech.
Oh, nice.
So we will, when we open, we'll have been in there for almost 2 weeks.
Nice.
So that's nice.
Nice.
Yeah, so we're lucky because Leroy Street Theatre is the resident company of the Assembly Theatre, so we do get a few privileges of being that, and one of those is kind of a bit of extra access in certain times, which is nice because our history is being a nomadic company, so we are used to the like day before kind of thing, load in, build, and then all of a sudden 1 or 2 rehearsals and go.
Yeah. But the Assembly is a wonderfully versatile space. I've seen lots of different setups in there. So, have you guys played much with the configuration or the set in there? What is your...
in terms of like set builds, we've done some pretty like wildly different things in there. We have kept, it's a traditional black box theater with the seating fairly static onto one side. So I don't know that we've done like an in the round or anything like that in terms of, layouts. But we've gone from everything from just kind of doing very simple black box to full kind of realistic apartments. And that's actually the last plays that we did as a company was 2 George F. Walker plays in these kind of low rent apartment buildings. And it was a double bill. So there was actually a full changeover of the set every night from one apartment to the other. So moving furniture, changing out curtains and all these other things to turn it into a completely different apartment.
Wow. So if I get everybody to say their name and what they're doing on the production, just so that people who are listening have a bit of a sense of whose voice is whose, and we'll start right here.
My name's Anurag Chaudhary, and I'm playing Doug.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Chin Polypaner, and I'm the stage manager and lighting designer for this production.
My name is Chris Bredisher, and I'm the director and also the set designer for this.
Nice.
My name is Alice Lundy, and I will be playing Kayleen.
Okay. And the play is Gruesome Playground Injuries?
Yeah, by Rajiv Joseph.
So, tell me about that play. What is Gruesome Playground Injuries about?
So Gruesome Playground Injuries is a 2-hander with Anurag and Alice. Doug and Kayleen are the characters. And it follows their lives starting at age 8, but it's a non-linear play that jumps through time back and forth all the way to the ages of 38. And, like the name of the play, these scenes are kind of highlighted through some gruesome injuries that the character of Doug has at the beginning of each scene. What really drew us to the play was a couple of things, and one of them being that kind of time jump, and it's just a wonderful play. But it's also a play that really the stage direction leans into the exposing of the scene transitions and the character costume changes and the set changes. And so between each scene, those will actually be lit and rehearsed and on the stage for the whole audience to see, and will become very much a part of the play and a part of the world that we're building for this piece.
Nice. So what is it? What drew you to this play?
I'll let Alice maybe take that one.
So Chris and I had been wanting to work on something, and we were looking at 2-handers just because the last couple projects that our company has worked on were pretty big casts. And we wanted a smaller, more intimate group of people to work with. And then Michael Ross Albert shared the script with me, and there were several things that I thought were really interesting about it on my first read. First of all, when you hear that it's a 2-hander with a female body and a male body, there are certain assumptions about the story that's going to be told, that it's going to be this traditional love story. And I think something about this script that's really wonderful is that at times it plays into those tropes and cliches of two star-crossed lovers not being able to find their way through the world. But at other times it kind of just slaps you in the face and says, that's not the story we're telling. This relationship is totally different. So it's surprising in the relationship, but I also thought that the relationship between Doug and Kayleen was more realistic and more honest in that way, because it wasn't just a simple love story. And I would be hesitant to say, and I think as a group we've been hesitant to even call it a love story. It's really an in-depth examination of friendship and the kind of love that comes with friendship. So that was really special. And then something else that we've been talking about, we've been really lucky to partner with a community service group called Loft, which our artistic director Anne Van Leeuwen set up for us. And basically what Loft does is they work with, we're working specifically with the youth group. And so they work with youth who deal with addiction issues, mental health issues, housing issues. And kind of why we partnered with them in this show is like a lot of those things are touched upon in this show. There's mental health is touched upon, self-harm, addiction, substance abuse, all those things are touched on, but it's not the focus, which I think is rare in theater. A lot of the times when you're dealing with a show that has to do with mental health, that's at the forefront of the story. But really what struck me with this story is that, and I'll speak specifically about Kayleen, is that I saw Kayleen as a full person, and then you learn about her mental illness. So she's not defined by it, which I find really exciting as an actor. She feels like a very full character who has secrets and depths and a history, but she doesn't let those things define who she is. They affect who she is, and they do affect our Doug and Kayleen's relationship. But that's not the only thing you see from her.
Well, you've talked a little bit about Kayleen, so let's talk a little bit more specifically. Who is Kayleen?
Sure. Kayleen is kind of a rougher girl, I guess. She's shy, a little bit of an outcast, doesn't have a lot of friends, but she makes very close friends with Doug. The relationships that she does have are meaningful. She had a bit of a troubled childhood. Her mom left when they were 11. Her dad's a bit of a rough, not very nice person. And so Doug and his family become very important to her because they embrace her and they're really a stable family that she can rely on. So she spends a lot of time running away, running away from her problems. She doesn't like to talk about her problems. She doesn't like to talk about her feelings. And Doug kind of brings her back, which is what's really special about him to her.
Cool. Well, why don't we talk about Doug for a second? Who is Doug in this show?
Starts off as an Evel Knievel fanatic, and that kind of goes into a fascination at really what the body can endure, specifically his own body, and that leads him to also being a bit of an outcast as well. However, he's able to, still kind of play out certain social situations as a boy, then going into a teenager, as a man going to college. It's kind of like that social script is still there for him, maybe because of like a slightly better upbringing compared to Kayleen. Yet he still has that one fascination with how much my body can take in terms of the durability of it that always makes him a bit more of an outcast, which is what has brought him to Kayleen. And, well, really then it's just about how their relationship, which I've kind of labelled as a bit of a prophecy at times, is like something that's just kind of written in the stars, but not, as we've touched upon, not in that stylized, romanticized way, but more so in just they're these people, whether they like it or not, they kind of need to be within close proximity of one another. However, that is still detrimental to their well-being. So it's it's just like real life, right?
You mentioned does the character actually is it an Evel Knievel fascination, or is that
there
reference?
is there is a reference there.
Okay.
I like to think that I'm able to channel my inner Evel Knievel. But it's like so it comes from like stunts and like playing out of stunts, and
it's interesting because it's not a name that you hear much anymore. When I was a kid, which is gonna date me entirely, Evel Knievel was like the thing. Like people had like Evel Knievel like toys, and you would like send your you wind it up and it would go, or you actually it had a pull cord and you'd send Evel Knievel on his insane motorcycle over cliffs and all this stuff.
It was really cool.
It was a thing.
Yeah.
Of course, you don't hear so much about there. We don't really have, I guess, aside from Jackass, we don't have Daredevils, and we don't have a modern day equivalent.
Yeah.
There's no Daredevils like that anymore. Does the reference date the play at all? Or?
Not entirely. From my knowledge, I think this was written
10 years ago.
Yeah. So I mean, Evel Knievel is older than the 90s even.
But the reference is made at age 8, so conceivably, if it was like, if you set a certain age, it would go back 30 years.
Yes.
So and that reference is made in the first scene when Kayleen and Doug first meet in their school nurse's office, and Doug has ridden his bike off the roof of the school. So he like really takes his Evel Knievel love literally.
And there's no rhyme or reason really behind it. It's just like I can do it, so why not?
There were many children like this of the Evel Knievel age who made terrible choices in similar fashions. Probably not so many. I'm not going to say that. Probably not many drove their bike off a school roof, but you know what? I'm sure plenty did. So we talked about the two characters and sort of what drew the company to the play. What's been the biggest challenge in putting the play together in terms of direction or?
So I would say one of the big things is, and even talking about the character of Doug and his love of Evel Knievel, he never really loses too much of his like childhood kind of innocence and bravado, but yet we still have to get there in terms of letting the audience know that we've traveled 5, 10, 15 years in time. Yeah. And because it's nonlinear, it's not, always immediately obvious. We might have jumped back 10 years in the scene, and then the next scene we jump forward 10 years, and then back 15 is actually the kind of mathematical format that Rajiv Joseph, the playwright, did it in. But that's not, that's his secret. Yeah. And if you read the script, that for definite. But then we have this challenge that at the opening of every scene, Anurag and Alice, both now as actors, have to let our audience know within the first, few lines, really, because we don't want to be challenging our audience to go, wait, is this, are they 20? Are they 18? Are they, and so that's something that we look at both in those scene transitions that will be exposed, how we actually show the transitioning of time, and then in our language and in our acting, and that's been a really big challenge day to day, because in one day of rehearsing we might cover all the ages, and then how do you stay focused in that one scene and forget everything else that's happened and really just be who that character is in that moment in time, without letting too much of everything else affect you. But it's been a fun challenge to take on, and talking all the way about costumes and sounds and how lighting affects that, and how their voice affects that, and their physical body movements in the space affects that.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting discussions we've been having.
Can we get a little bit like actively nerdy for a second?
Yeah,
Because I want
of
to talk about the challenge of adults playing children. Which I've seen done really well, and I've seen done really poorly. Where, the difficulty is that a lot of times when an adult plays a child, they don't come across as a child. They come across as
an adult playing a
an
child.
adult playing a child. So what, like, how do you approach the acting challenge of playing a child without it looking like you are... I don't know. The difficulty is I've seen people describe it as, they look like they are like somebody who's mentally deficient or something like that.
Right.
When the adult is playing the child. So how do you approach playing a child in that way?
I think I think it's been different for both of us because our characters are very different, and of course children are very different depending on their personality. So for me, it was a lot to do with like eye behavior, where I was looking when. We talked a lot about the rhythm of speech, and also thought patterns, that the conversation that we're having maybe doesn't link up right away. We'll answer certain questions like 3 lines later that someone posed before. So I guess it's kind of like looking at those things that are really tangible things of what is the rhythm that they speak in? How do they tell a story? How do they link ideas together? And less so like focusing on like if we look like children, I guess. Yeah. More just what can we do to say that we're that age? I think and playing with how children, they talk to each other differently. Yeah. Maybe they'll speed up for a second and slow down. Maybe they won't look at you for the whole time, or they'll get really excited and be really intense with eye contact. Or, when are they physically closed? When are they physically open? So I think we've been trying to focus on those really tangible things. Intonation, rhythm, stuff like that.
Which, in a weird way, kind of takes it away from being a child. That's the one thing, is because you kind of have to block it. And there's no problem with being sporadic. That's that we can do any day. But it's about finding that sporadic nature and still blocking it and having it become a routine, which we've been given via the script. The script's been very well written, where we can trust it and we can trust the words to kind of take us as adult actors to that point in our lives. But yes, the challenging part is actually making it then a piece of theatre. And well, as Chris touched on, it is a challenge that that we've thoroughly enjoyed. And now it's up to you folks to decide, really.
Chin, just to touch on lighting for a second, like how I mean, let's go full nerd. How are you what is the process of lighting a show like this that is jumping back and forth in time?
Ooh, okay, cool. So, we get to play with, a couple of things. So you could just traditionally, set this as, all right, they're in a hospital now, I'm going to light this like a hospital. They're in an outdoor skating rink, so I'm going to light that like that. But what's cooler is, or at least the way I like to design, is attaching colors, and this leans more into, gel-specific things of, this specific hue of lavender. I'm going to make that so that each transition has elements of this comprised in it. That way we create, and Chris and I have discussed how we sort of separate these transitional zones. Even though they're on stage, we fully see these actors changing, setting up things, setting up the new scenes, but how can we make these different from our playing spaces? where we move through different things.
Yeah.
And then what I get to play with is how I choose my warms and cools and how I want those to shift over the course of a story. And so because we're still in the development part of this, for at least my part of my lighting design, I'm still playing with notions and theories. Is it going to be the sort of thing where I have static warms that exist for the entirety of the show, and I'm shifting out my cools and playing with intensities to be like, this is an outdoor skating rink. This is clearly like an overcast day in January. Or this is inside a hospital and they've dimmed the lights because this person has undergone a tragic injury and they can't deal with light sensitivity. And cool things like that. But for me, it's more separating those zones and trying to, like Chris said, we have to give a lot of information in the first couple lines of each scene, particularly with how sporadically the play shifts through time. We see them as 18-year-olds, we see them as 23-year-olds, we see them as 38-year-olds, but that's never explicitly stated. It's shown within the acting, the moments they reference when you as an audience member go, wait a minute, they're talking about that thing. Oh, that thing that I saw. Oh, so this isn't just A, B, C, D. This is more A, E, C, X, G. Yeah, and I guess it's fun for me to think of like how I can also mirror my choices of colors with the ages that they exist in, while sort of keeping each scene unique to what it is, but providing an overall arcing metaphor that connects them through. So it's not just a collection of cool looks, but there's a reason that this, as an example, like cool soft blue that exists when they're children and they're playing outside in a playground exists 20 years later when they're at an ice rink, except it's more brighter, but there's something like fall about it, or like dead in the thing of like leaves have fallen, time has passed, but you still get hints of that thing there. So how can I play with age and time in a color spectrum as well?
And how is this all in your head right now? How do you work through this sort of stuff?
Yes and no. The majority of it is in my head and in my mind, as particularly because I also am benefited by being the stage manager for this. So as I see the direction that Chris is leading people when, or certain choices we're making, I'll be like, oh, that cool blue effect that I was thinking of doesn't quite work here as well as I thought. Maybe I'm going to shift that to be more of a slate blue thing. And so it's like constantly evolving. And sort of once I've done a bit more of my prep work, I'll have more solid ideas, but there's still a certain amount of play that I can have. And I can go into the space and be like, oh, I thought this would work this way, but based on certain costume choices that our wonderful costume designer Lindsay has made, or certain set colors that Chris has made, I'm like, oh, this is popping in not quite the way I want, so I'm going to shift this, and then my metaphor then shifts accordingly as well.
So there's a lot of flexibility that you'll have to have once you're putting it together in the space.
Yes, but that's also like kind of the fun of it being like, oh, I thought this would work this way, and it kind of does, but I'm hoping more for this, and Chris will be like, well, why don't we do this? I'm like, no, don't be silly. I'm not going to paint this entirely, but what if we did this? And he'll be like, and I get to have that fun sort of play with Chris, and then the actors making sure, like, you know, that they can see what they're trying to do, or that this works for what we're trying to achieve.
I want to say that it's actually a really rare thing to be able to see an indie theater company that has somebody who's like a lighting person, because usually you're indie, you're like lights up, lights down, maybe some color, like a color, you know. And so it's and I've had the opportunity to work with a couple of like lighting designers in a couple of projects, and it's night and day. Between like just being able to like throw some light on a thing and to have somebody who's like able to think about this sort of thing.
Yes, or like make those. It's like having a designer for something.
Yeah,
right. Like yes, we can all put costumes together and sure it'll look great. But if you have someone who's like, no, there's a reason she wears a skirt here, and there's a reason it's this color. It may not be evident to every audience member, but there's a certain amount of design choices or metaphors that are being played with. That, like, when done amazingly well, you're like, oh, that shade of lipstick matches that. No, that can't have been chance.
But even then, there are things that, like, you might not consciously be aware of.
Of course.
Like, I've done a show, we had, like, this lighting transition. It was like a subtle transition. And the idea was not that anybody would sit there and go, oh, lighting transition, but it was like that it would underscore what was happening in the scene in such a way that that subconsciously it would occur to somebody would feel it subconsciously without going, oh, I see what this symbolizes or whatever that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's like the most fun to play with, or is like when you do things super subtly that no one would notice. I did a show years and years ago when I was an early, young, handsome novice designer.
Still so handsome.
And what it was is like this girl was working in a coffee shop, and whenever her crush would come in, I designed it ideally so no one would notice, but it just got a little bit brighter. And whenever her crush would leave, it would get a little bit cooler. And it wasn't meant to be like this big thing or like an important cue that everyone would notice, but I wanted it to subtly be there, that like her life was just improved by this guy hanging out and chatting with her.
And just for specificity, this was Rebecca Perry's
yes,
redheaded coffee shop girl.
Girl.
Who was guest number 1 on the podcast.
No way!
Just to throw that out there.
All back.
Yeah.
I think we are really lucky to be able to work. We have designated, for this show specifically, a designated lighting designer, although you're also stage manager. We also have a designated costume designer, Lindsay Dagger-Junkin, who is incredible at what she does. And what's been really great about that, we also have a designated sound designer, Will Jarvis. And what's so great about that is like, Lindsay will come in with costumes and talk about our characters, and she'll make me realize something about Kayleen that I had never even thought of, because she's reading the script through a different lens. Or like how hearing Chin talk about the lights, you realize things about characters or like through lines that I maybe haven't thought of because I'm so focused on this point of view. So that's definitely, and of course, like having Chris as a director, like as an outside eye, but also with Chris thinking of the set as well. It's been really valuable for me as an actor, being able to have conversations with all these different people who come in with different lenses for the play.
Now, one of the other challenges that indie companies often have is the promotion of a show. Which I mean, obviously we're doing this podcast, but there's other things that you're doing. So do you have somebody who is you've got all these other designated roles? Do you have somebody who's designated as promotion?
In Leroy Street Theatre, it's made up of a group of 4 of us: Anne Van Leeuwen, Melissa Wright, Alice Lundy, who is our Kayleen, and myself. We all kind of take different turns doing different things at times, but Melissa Wright is really kind of our kind of production manager of Leroy Street Theatre, and she'll take on a lot of those things in terms of our social media and our Instagram, and but it's always is a renewed challenge every time. I think making sure we're postering the city and putting out specific timed Instagram posts and trying to get the reviewers in at the right times and stuff. But we are fortunate enough that we've been around as a company long enough now that we've kind of established a bit of a routine, and we just continually work on that and build it and make sure that it's a practice thing. But the 2 missing people from this room, well, there's lots of missing people from this room. Actually, the play has a lot of really talented people in it. But Melissa Wright and Anne Van Leeuwen, our other 2 producers, are kind of who are experienced producers, are taking on a lot of that stuff for us, which is fantastic because I think you do have to limit how many hats you wear in a play. And in indie theater, it's very typical that you have to wear more than one sometimes, but I think 2 might be kind of getting there. 3 is almost pushing it.
It is. I mean, doing like fringe theater as I have, and sometimes with a company, but sometimes solo, it becomes like when you're doing a solo show, you're like
wearing all the hats.
All of the hats, and that's a lot to take on. So
start using your head. It's just hats.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I found actually that what I had to do was like preload as much as possible just to handle it. Like do a whole bunch of work before we went into rehearsal, and know that like there were all of these things that I could press go on at any given time. And I only learned that like this year. And the rest of it was just like going, this is why I have no hair. Anyway,
pulling it
out all the time. One of the things you mentioned was like making sure that you have posters out in the city, and I want to like the question that I often have is, do you have a sense of like how effective posters are for you?
You know, I can't remember who I was talking to the other day saying that one of the smartest things we could do as a company going forward is starting to ask people, how did you hear about us? We've actually just started on this show our kind of a first official like mailing list, you know, of people who have bought tickets to a Leroy Street Theatre show in the past. But I do find that I am surprised oftentimes with people coming in and going like, oh, I just, you know, I was in a coffee shop and I saw this postcard on the thing, or I think sometimes it's often people who walk by, I think is really useful. So the big poster in the window of the Assembly, and we're lucky enough that the Assembly Theatre is in Parkdale on Queen Street with like a storefront window.
Yeah.
And that actually does do pretty good. Like the amount of times that we'll be hanging out on the sidewalk, you know, getting ready for a show, and somebody walks by and goes like, what is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think theater can be a little intimidating at times. It's weird because all of us who go to it and are involved in the community think, well, no, we're the nicest people ever. But to just walk into, you know, the front door of a space that doesn't always look like a theater and go like, should I be in here? Like, when is the show? Okay? How much are tickets? Yeah. And so we definitely try to be as welcoming as possible as a presence, and a big part of that community too in Parkdale there. Like we are always looking for ways to connect with the people that live right around us in our immediate area.
Well, I mean, Assembly Theatre is like in the basement of an apartment building, isn't it? Like, there's people who live there.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, talking about, like, trying to figure out where people come from. I've been noticing more and more lately about the effectiveness of advertising on Facebook, Instagram, and things like that. In that, if I see an ad the first time, I go buy it. I don't even care.
Yeah.
If they keep showing it to me, I click on it.
Yeah.
And so it's like the importance of like making sure that people see things. I think, well, what was it? Years ago, people would say like, you know, it's important people see your post. They have to see your poster like 7 times before they actually notice it, or something like that. Yeah. It's sort of similar with online advertising that like the more we see it, the more likely we are to actually.
We've actually been really lucky with our poster designer is what's her name, Alice? It's
Kathleen Odette.
She's actually she's a graphic designer, but a book cover designer by trade. Nice. And so in talking with her about the poster, one of the things that is at the forefront of her mind when she's designing is what pops off the shelf when you're a book in a sea of books.
Yeah.
So somebody walks into a bookstore and there's thousands of books around you. And so when we got our first copy of the poster, I was like, whoa, like almost a little shocked. I was like, maybe we tone it back. And then she kind of told me her thought process and idea. And of course, you know, you have to let the professional do their work and trust in their motivations behind it. And so we have this like really great poster, this kind of bright orange thing that kind of leaps off the page to you, whether it's, you know, the physical postcard or the poster or online. So we'll see how that works.
It's interesting because when you mention that, I'm thinking of books that I've purchased on the basis of their cover, and I've taken a chance on the book, and it hasn't always worked out. But it's like it works, so that's really great.
Yeah, and whether we even think about that or not, it's always happening to us. So like you said, it's like it might not be that you probably don't acknowledge that you've seen this on Facebook 7 times, and now on the 7th I'm going to click on it. It just enters your subconsciousness, and after a while you're like, why is this always? I gotta find out more about this.
I actually think that you don't see it the first time.
Maybe, yeah.
Because we're so used to ads, we don't even really notice it the first time we scroll past, and maybe not the second time. And then something in the back of our head starts to notice it, and then eventually you click on it, which is like a weird psychological thing that I think I need to.
I think that, and I don't know if we've like definitely solved it with this show in any way, but something that I think is really challenging for indie theater is because your resources are limited, and a lot of the time the people doing these postering and all these things and social media are also doing different jobs in the show, and also have part-time, full-time jobs they are doing to financially support themselves. And so a big challenge of indie theater is always how do we get the people who come to our shows regularly to come out, but also how do we expand our audience with each show we do? And that's really challenging. And that's one of the ways that we've tried to do that with this show specifically is working with Loft. So working with a community organization outside of theater with people who don't necessarily come to theater, where theater might be really intimidating to them. And so with Loft, we've been running, which has been really great. We've been running introductory theater workshops with them every week. And then during the run of our show, some of the clients at Loft are going to be showing their artwork in our lobby.
Nice.
So hopefully a couple new people will come to see the theater, you know? So it's like thinking about how do we just reach out to the people who have come, but how do you expand your audience?
The eternal indie theater question.
Yeah.
Or how can you make a theater accessible to people who may not have access to it or be aware of it, like you said?
It's funny because theater is like one of the only forms of entertainment where you will hear somebody say, "I saw a play once, I didn't like it,
Yeah.
and so I don't like theater."
Yeah.
You know, and you look at somebody and be like, "But
They're all
You,
so
like-
different.
you
Yeah.
like, have gone to shitty movies, and then you still go to
And you
movies.
still see movies.
You know, you've watched shitty TV. You still like all of this stuff. Like, why is theater this thing that you saw one bad play and now you won't go to theater anymore? It's this weird thing. And also, people have this perception: theater, I can't afford that.
Yeah.
You know, which is a strange thing.
Yeah, it's something that we struggle with in terms of ticket prices and trying to find, we do the pay what you can nights, but we're also trying to find ways to, give discounts or the art workers tickets and how to, and really like, honestly, we've had discussions of what's the lowest we can set our ticket prices while we still know that hopefully we can pay for this play. Like our goal is to really try to get as many people to see this piece that we're hoping is going to be this wonderful, magical, play. And in the end, the more people that are in the theater, the happier we are. It's not about, the more money we can suck out of people in terms of ticket price.
But ticket price is a funny thing because you can price yourself too low that people are like, well, if they're pricing the ticket that low,
It's not
it's not worth it.
There's no value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing where free tickets, people don't have no meaning, and it's just, it's a weird thing. So Alice, the two, we have, people can't see this, but I have two on one side and two on one side. So over here we have people who are members of the company. You've been working with the company for a long time. And over on my right, we have two people who have you guys worked with Leroy Street before? How did you come to this show?
Go ahead.
I saw an audition notice and I went over to Alice's father's house where the auditions were, not knowing what to expect. Just kind of got a little blurb about what the play was about, and I've just moved here, so it's been about 7 months now. So still kind of looking around, and I was very I'm here for the ride, and well, I like to think that it's a fun way for not only for me to expand, but also vice versa, especially talking about going into different markets and whatnot, and different just social circles. That's kind of what I find my utility in as well. Not just active, but you're able to spread it to your own peers, and really I'd like to think I've become part of the family.
When you did that audition, what did you know about the show?
Nothing.
The 2 sentences we wrote.
Yeah, 2 sentences. Hey, here's 2 people with faces.
So he still got cast, even though he broke the rule of please familiarize yourself with the play, at least in terms of reading a synopsis available online. The auditions were interesting because Alice was already a cast Kayleen, so we had 50% of our cast going into our auditions, and we did 2 really full days of auditions, Alice and I together. And it was a tough call, but ultimately Anurag was cast in the role because of the connection, and that was such a privilege to be able to see everybody reading with Alice right off the bat, because you're looking for a talented actor, which we got in Enereg, but you're also looking for a connection in a two-hander. These two people are sharing the stage through the whole play. So they each are taking on 50% of the weight of this. And so that was great.
It's super important. Like, if you don't have that, you can't come back from that. Like, if there isn't if there is no chemistry, the best lighting, the best direction, the best sets, the best costumes, that can't
replicate that missing element.
Yeah. Well, good thing you found the right.
Yeah, I think it's pretty. I mean, Enereg and I always talk about how it's crazy with how we've only known each other for 2 months. Because
now we know too much.
Things you cannot unlearn.
You always learn so much about your fellow actors when you're working on a show together. It's like it's almost like when we go into a show, we should all sign like NDAs with our actors. Like,
you keep these secrets
about me.
You take these to the
maybe
grave.
other people shouldn't know.
But I think that's something that's really special about theater, and that's super unique about the industry, is that you this play, but a lot of plays, you're super vulnerable around people, and you can speak about being, I guess, someone who's never worked with us before and coming into the room and dealing with that vulnerability. But
definitely at first quite nervous, as happens, Here are a group of people who all know each other very well, and I'm an outsider. And then you kind of... The fact that, like, obviously you're able to be vulnerable, but then you're able to share that vulnerability with everyone else in the room, and then the final, like, cap off of that is you're able to laugh about it. You're able to have a good time about it, and, like, no matter how grave the topics are that you're kind of going into, it's like, all right, we're discussing this in this space. It's going to stay in this space, and then afterwards we're all going to be friends again. We're all going to love each other, and that really is a brings a tear to your eye.
It is one of those great things about a theater company, in that whenever we come together on a show, we form a little family, a little temporary family, and it's always sad when that family has to go its separate ways. But there's always a little bit of that left, even if you. Like, there are people I worked with like 10 years ago, and we run into each other on the street. It's like running into like my brother or something. Which is one of the great things about theater that I don't think you get anywhere else. So.
No, but you don't get it with every show too.
No.
And I think that's always part of the risk, is even if you know all the people you're going to work with, like the certain mixture of people, the show, the time of year, all those things play into this. Like, it's really part of the magic of theater, is that you can't peg down or predict if this group of people is going to have the right chemistry to survive 2 months of intensively working together, 4 months of
that. I mean, that is the risk, because what if you guys hate each other?
And it
came close.
We had like a particularly difficult rehearsal, and Enereg and I were walking to Queen Street, and you said to me, you were like, this play would be really hard if I hated you. If I didn't like you, this play would be really hard to do. And I think that's true. Yeah. So we're definitely lucky.
Yeah.
I also think it's a testament to us as professionals that we're able to create a safe space where we can have intelligent discussions, or we can disagree with each other adamantly, but we can hear each other's rationales. Chris can lead us through the direction he's trying to take. An actor can be like, well, I think this choice is the right one, and we can discuss it. And even though it can become a heated discussion, we can all leave as professionals, be like, okay, we've now arrived at this conclusion. Let's try it out.
Yeah.
Let's play. Let's work. And it doesn't feel like anyone is being attacked or shamed for their choices, or wanting to try things or bring new thoughts or ideas into the space. And I think that's on us all being really good at what we do and being accepting and being like, no, we want to make this the best possible story possible. Let's do that.
Nice.
And for Chris, and providing that environment as
Yes.
a director.
And facilitating that.
Directors who have not allowed for any congestion, and Chris has.
And also Chin, for also making sure that, like, because we did work through a lot of, there's some physically intimate moments in the show. So I think Chin really took the reins on making sure that consent was something that happened, and we always felt safe, and that we always had an out. that consent wasn't given. So
Yeah. Well, in terms of working with the company before, we talked about Anurag being new to Toronto. Chin, we have worked with before in the past. And so there was a bit of a courting period in us really wanting to make sure he could be a part of this team because we knew that he would help create that environment. And so, lighting designer was the first thing we wanted him for, but then we had to really kind of stretch and ask him to put on the second hat to be our stage manager. And we're lucky that we secured him for both those roles.
Is there something? So you guys, I mean, this is for all you guys. This show's been performed before, but not by you. So, what are you most looking forward to about having an audience see this show?
Knocking the socks off. What Alice has said that there have been several folks, within the community who've either read the play or have seen the show and are actually quite excited for our retelling of it. And
but I think no one who's working on the show right now had ever read it before we started to do this show. Yeah. But I think as performers, maybe what I'm excited about is the dissonance. I think experiencing that. Going into a scene, being fully in character, coming off of our mini stage that Chris has created for ourselves, and then switching out our costumes, the audience seeing the really practical things. And I think that's a lot for you too with your makeup.
Yeah, I have to do all my makeup on stage.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so I'm excited to experience, I'm nervous, but also excited to be to see what they think of it.
Nice.
Of suddenly we're in a scene and then we're not, and that's part of a world of theater that they don't really get to see.
Well, I think in terms of theater, we often like to think about how we can not have to compete with going to the movies or watching TV, and so something that theater has intrinsically is both being live, but also the ability to break that fourth wall. And so this play did make us quite excited because it is something that highlights these scene transitions. And so I've challenged the actors, and something we're going to take this a step further is they're never going to leave the stage. So from the moment that the audience starts taking their seats, they're going to see our actors in their street clothes getting changed into their costumes and doing the work that normally would happen in the green room. And then they're going to see our stage manager come down and give them their 5-minute, curtain call. And even, all the way to the end of the play, they are just exposed and on stage. And so people are going to come and really get a kind of a look into, they're going to get this entertaining, great show, but also a look into what happens, behind the scenes.
The backstage elements, the tricks. And stuff.
And I think that's something that theater offers that you can't really get anywhere else. And that's one of the reasons why we're excited to produce this play.
Nice. Thanks a lot, you guys. It's been great.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
This has been a Homebody Productions production.